Hi everyone, welcome to this Carcanet book launch. My name's Jasmine, I'm from Carcanet Press. Of course, we're here this evening together to celebrate Isabel Williams' new book. So this is Catullus, Shibari Carmina, which hopefully you can see there, complete with Isabel's drawings. So we'll be joined by Isabel tonight. She's gonna join us in just a second. We're also joined by barrister Catherine Rowlands, who will introduce Isabel and the book in just a second. So just a couple of pointers before I hand over to Catherine. You may have realised that you can't turn your cameras on. Unfortunately, we can't see you, so please do find the chat. Say hello to us, let us know what you think of the readings throughout. We'd love to say hello to you in there. So this evening is going to last about 1 hour. Isabel and Catherine are going to have a little chat about the book before our readings. Then we'll have about 20-25 minutes of readings that I'll be streaming for you. And afterwards we'll have a little bit more discussion. We'd like to kind of open that out to you. So as well as finding the chat box, please do try to find the Q&A box. Catherine will be able to put some questions to Isabel on your behalf later, so do get those lines up in the Q&A box for them. I think that's really everything that you need to know from me. I will put the code and the link for you to buy the book in the chat now, but this will also come as an email tomorrow, so don't worry about doing everything all at once. If it doesn't come, just get in touch with me, we're here to help. And if you've got any questions during the event, just pop them in the chat and we'll help you there as well. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Catherine. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much, Jasmine. It is my huge honour and great pleasure to welcome you all to the launch of this book, Catullus, Shibari Carmina by Isabel Williams. I just wish we could do this face to face so that you could all have pleasure of picking up this book straight away and flipping through it like I've been able to see the beautiful illustrations and the scintillating descriptions of Catullus's poems in that book. But I do encourage you to click on the link in the chat and you can go and buy the book and get it delivered very quickly. So my name's Catherine Rowlands. I'm barrister, I'm Cornerstone Barristers in London, and I specialise in public law. A few years ago, I was doing a case in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court being a court with the best curtains in the country, as well as the best judges. And it was in the case that I was doing there that I first got to know Isabel. She was illustrating the case, which was one that related to homelessness and vulnerability. And in her blog, she coupled pictures of the court case, the academic discussion of vulnerability, with pictures of the homeless people, the subject of that case, bringing them vividly to life. She kindly sent me some of the illustrations that she'd done of the case afterwards. And so I was able to share them with the people who were involved in the case. And we were absolutely delighted by them. To me, Isabel has the gift of using just a line or two in her drawings to evoke a whole world. And so her economical, vivid line drawings bring out the whole circus and drama of Supreme Court advocacy and the world that we were in at that time, bringing out a character in just a few strokes. So after that, I started following her on Twitter, and I noticed that her Twitter handle is Otium Catulle. This was intriguing to me, so this was an indication that there was far more to this lady than simply the illustrations, good though those are. There was her blog about the courtroom drawings, so that gives us as lawyers another view of our cases. And all those of us on legal Twitter were really excited with her book about the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, a guide for bears, with its illustrations of the cutest little teddy bears, as well as real insight into our world, the Supreme Court. Her latest book is somewhat different, although, as she pointed out to me earlier, it's a book that links two things that you might not expect to go together. The Supreme Court and teddy bears, Catullus and Shibari. What's all that about? But those two things perfectly complement each other. This is very much a Catullus translation for our times. What do we know about Catullus? Well, not that much really. He's someone who we don't even know the dates of his death and his birth. He wrote 116 poems that we know of. I like to think that there might be some more out there. The story is that the ones that we have were found rolled up as a bung in a wine cask, but there may have been more that were lost. He died or stopped writing, maybe aged maybe 29 or 30 after the death of his much loved brother. But maybe he carried on, maybe he lived on, we just don't know. But in a really short span of time, he produced poems that range over the whole gamut of human emotion and experience. He covers jokey topics, little messages to his friends, puns, plays on words. He covers lyrical, high poetic themes, the love he has for his beloved Lesbia and his brother in terms that evoke the highest level of human emotion. And he also writes, frankly, smut. There's the corny, the vulgar, the dirty. And again, Catullus has the gift of using just a line or two to evoke a whole world. Odi et amo, he says, I hate and I love. And with those brief words, we are plunged into a whole world of heartbreak. That feeling that you have when you can't stop loving someone that you hate. We've all been there. I know I have when I was a teenager. As a poet, he's influenced those who were contemporary with him, those in the medieval period, and those who are writing today. His poems speak of some things that are so relevant throughout the ages, not just what troubled ancient Romans, of course, but what trouble us today, perhaps as today we enter the second year of restrictions and lockdown. Catullus speaks to us about the bonds we are all in, the way bondage, ties, leads to freedom, the everyday bonds of lover to lover, the state to the governed, contractor to co-contractor, and of course, the bond that leads from the poet to the reader to the poet. Of course, every rope leads in two directions. Isabel's tight, vivid translations of Catullus's poems draw on modern idiom, including, for example, the terseness of Twitter's 280 character limit. You can imagine how Catullus would have tweeted, how he would have reveled in the constraints that that idiom imposes. And he uses the language of Japanese rope bondage, shibari, something that I was not aware of. And its terminology evokes that kind of freedom in bonds that Catullus speaks to us so vividly of. She says in her introduction to the book, translating Catullus has been for me like cage fighting with two opponents, not just the top poet, but also the schoolgirl I was, trained to show the examiner that she knew what each word meant. And she says that when she went into the Shibari venue in South London, things fell into place because the schoolgirl wasn't allowed in through the door. I'm going to ask her more about what she meant by that in a moment. But I also want to tell you what other people say about Isabel's translations. The poet John Clegg has said that she handles words in a style as fast as a flick knife, very much echoing Catullus's ability to flick out words at you to make that evocation of the whole world. He says what makes Catullus appealing to translators is paradoxically what makes him impossible to translate. We identify with him and the situations he describes far more than any other Roman poet, but this identification is dependent on glossing over the differences between Roman sexual mores and our own. And those mores, when we come to them, are unfamiliar, unappealing, and in places unreconstructible. Isabel Williams has found a unique way around these problems. Shibari, or Japanese rope bondage, is unfamiliar enough, at least to me, to serve as a permanent reminder that the sexual practices and politics of Catullus's world are not my own. The poems rendered into those terms, it feels like a major blockage has been lifted. We can see more of the poet because we can see honestly the parts of him that we're out of sympathy with. This to me is the central accomplishment of these strange translations. Rope bondage also supplies a lively idiolect of metaphor and idiom. Poem 7, the one about counting kisses, I'd always assumed was untranslatable. There was no way the emotion and erotic charge could be brought across. William's translation is the best I've seen by a mile. I shan't read it to you now because that will come later. The important thing is the restoration of exteriority, refusal of coziness. Now that we finally have a Catullus sufficiently alien, we can get on with deciding what we think is poetry. So what Isabel has given us is a translation and a set of illustrations that, like Catullus himself, gives us a line or two that bring us into his world. Isabel, can I ask you to join me now on the screen and unmute yourself?
Mute, start my video. Did that work?
That's working fine, thank you.
Okay, good. Well, of course, you mentioned our earlier friends. He's just going to go now, that's all right. And you sort of mentioned this as well. There's my ring light, just to show everybody. Thank you very much indeed, Catherine. So yeah, we're here. And if my pictures of rope bondage can somehow implant themselves in people's minds to go with the poet Catullus, I'd be quite happy actually to achieve that sort of shift in the iconography of Catullus, because something happened in the 19th century. There became a vogue for depicting Catullus and his great love, Lesbia, this aristocratic woman who was older, richer, kind of everythinger really than he was. Painters started to depict Catullus and or Lesbia with or without a sparrow alive or dead, the sparrow, the great symbol of the love between them, as attractive people out of a martini advertisement in drapery. So here you have, this is a book published in 2011 with basically a drapery study on it, a pretty woman in lovely flowing clothing. This is by John William Waterhouse. Obviously she's not, she's supposed to be Ariadne actually, not Lesbia. Ariadne features in poem 64 and she's supposed to be on the island of Naxos. She's very clearly in John William Waterhouse's studio in St. John's Wood. That was 2011, and in the book that's published next month, this is just a printout of the cover, not a very good printout. This is the Cambridge Companion to Catullus, published next month. And here we have, yet again, same kind of drapery study from a little bit later, from the 20th century. And it's not just a drapery study, it is actually a fashion plate as well. It's a Fortuny knockoff. She's holding up her living sparrow there. And you've also got a hint, if I may say so, of a bondage tie. It's called a takate kote. It's a box tie. It's a sort of harness which is useful for hanging people up. So as I say, if my bondage drawings can move the iconography on a bit, I'd be happy with that. Here is, by the way, some bondage rope, and anybody who knows about shibari, that's the word in my title, which means in Japanese tying or binding or to tie. Anyone who knows about shibari, seeing this tatty, sloppy presentation of the rope will understand straight away that I'm not interested in the actual practical side, the mechanics. And I don't always draw the rope even, just don't have time to do that. Anyway, sorry, you were saying?
I was going to ask you, arising out of that, you've chosen in your translation to use the name Clodia rather than Lesbia. Why was that?
Well, a number of people do. It's thought that she was probably a woman called Claudia Metelli, or if not, she might have been one of her sisters, also called Claudia. I just wanted to move away from the ideal of Lesbia, and along with everything else, just take off a little bit of the varnish, apply a little bit of acetone, or in some cases I've applied a bucket of paint stripper, but I'm just happier normally with the name Clodia, except it's the one you read out actually, poem number 87, which we will come to in the film which we're just about to see. Because my brain's now turned to mush, but I think I retained the name Lesbia there because you're actually talking about a legal contract, and I thought I'd better be really legalistic here and use well, not the correct name, but it's the name that he gave to her in the poetry, actually written as written.
Perhaps we'd better talk about shibari as well, because not everybody knows what that is. Could you tell us a little bit about shibari and how it works in the title of the book?
It is the art of Japanese rope bondage. It's a consensual form. When I see it, when I go to see it, it is as performance. So it's something which is entertainment, it's rehearsed, it's staged. And occasionally I go to workshops where, again, people are working quite hard, they're being taught. So these are both quite formal situations. It stems from some ancient samurai practice of restraining your enemy. It has become converted over the years. There's a bondage picture, I'll get my lefts and my rights right one day, just above me there, which you can remotely see. The book is full of bondage illustrations, so you get this kind of effect going on. And I felt, because Catullus is in a state of voluntary, consensual, emotional bondage, but also living in ancient Rome, which, let's face it, would strike us as pretty weird and horrible and unlivable in, apart from anything else being a slave-owning society. We wouldn't understand it. The smells are different. Suetonius said it's the sort of place where a dog would pick up a man's hand in the street, or a human hand in the street. And I felt that it was an ideal setting for Catullus, emotionally enabling me to approach him, but also, as John Clegg has pointed out, showing how alien he and his society actually were. Now, are we going, I'm not sure about the timing, do we get to show the film in a minute? Is that the idea?
Well, I was just going to ask you just one more question about your schoolgirl,
yes.
Your inner schoolgirl. Tell us about her.
Well, my inner schoolgirl was trained to cope with these. This is an A-level Latin paper. This is an O-level Latin paper. These lovely faded pink and blue colors will set some people's stress levels rising even now. The thing about these exams is you need to show the examiner you know exactly what the words mean and how the grammar all fits together. Now, I am not dissing my education, far from it, and I was delighted to have a phone call this afternoon from my classics teacher from school. I'm still sort of on cloud 9 from that, really. By the time I left school, I was certainly equipped to do a free translation, but I needed, I think, to do a lot more living, apart from discovering the whole metaphor of rope bondage, before I was truly able to tackle Catullus. But when I did, obviously, you know the dictionary definition of the word, but you have to swim in a much bigger sea. And that schoolgirl saying, oh, but it only means this or it only means that, really has to be knocked aside. And that was a bit of a tussle for a while.
So going into the Shibari world freed you out from the bonds of Latin O-level and A-level?
Well, it helped me to recognize Catullus, because I there met him and I met Lesbia, or I met composites of them, and I found a world in which this timid grammar school girl from Woking could relate to this libertine from ancient Rome, who's a sort of a superstar of the literary canon. And I was able, I'm not saying to meet him on equal terms, but at least to start to look him in the eye, and found a place where I could approach him, but also show, as John Clegg has very cleverly, much more than I could have done, pointed out, to show how alien he and his world was. In other words, you have him, when you're life drawing, when you're drawing a body, a human being, you have to have that body almost eviscerated on a slab. You need to look that intensely. And it's the same with the poet. You can't fall in love with the poet you're translating. You've got to have a very cold eye, have that poet's works on the slab, and the whole Shibari context. All I can say is it worked for me. It enabled me to do that.
I think the video that we're about to watch will show everybody else why it works. I think we need to explain that at the moment we've got some Sappho to start off with. Why does Sappho come into this?
Now, Sappho was a great influence on Catullus, and she was about as distant from Catullus as Shakespeare is from us today. And I start with Sappho 31, fragment 31, in ancient Greek. Then the first English translation you will hear is my translation of the Sappho. It's not in the book, don't panic, it's okay. Then the poem after that is Catullus's own version of that Sappho poem, followed by 2 of my English versions of Catullus's version of the Sappho poem. So basically we're starting with the same thought 5 times, the hand of Catullus, if you like. So I hope everyone's clear with that. But please, I do hope the film will spark lots of questions, and I'm so grateful to the people who filmed themselves in lockdown, succumbing to my emotional blackmail or whatever it was that made them do it.
Jasmine, shall we play the film now then?
Hi, I'm Agni Scott and I'm reading Sub 431 in Ancient Greek. Φαίνεται μη κείνος ίσως θέησιν έμμεν όνειρ, ότι ενάντιος της δάνει και πλάσιον άδει φωνή σας υπακούει, και γελέσας ημέρο εν το μήμαν καρδίαν ελστήθεσιν επτόεσεν, ως γάρες είδο βρόχε, ως με φώνε σου δεν ετίκη. Αλλάκαν με γλώσσα έαγε, λέπτον, δάφτικα χρώη πύρυπα δε δρόμικεν, οπτάτης ιδούδεν όριν, επιρόμδης ιδάκουε. Έκαδε μύδρος ψύχρος κακχέεται, τρόμος δε, πέσαν άγρι, χλωροτέρα δε πίασεν μη, τεθνάκιν δο λίγο πηδεύεις φαίνομαι μαύτε. Αλλά παν τόλμα τον επίη και πένιτα,
I could take him for a god, that man, leaning so close to you that you can feel the fur on his arms, lapping up your milky words, your silky laughter. Wings beat out of time against my ribcage, because the smallest glimpse of you snuffs me out. You clamp my tongue. Nerves shoot scalding traces under my skin. Eyes lose their signal. White noise breaks my defenses. A seizure makes me a shuddering delta of sweat. My flesh is grass, and that man's glory the flower of grass. My flower falls away, sensed by me only. But I can bear everything, because even a woman with nothing.
Ille mi parece de ovidetur, ille si facest superare Dios, qui sedens adversus identitem te spectatet audit dulgeridentem, misero quod omnis eripit sensus mi, nam simultaneus aspexi, nihil est super mi. Lingua se torpet, tenuis subatus flamma demanat, sonitus opte tintinant aures, geminate contur lumina nocte.
Otium, Catule, tibi molest est. Oti exultas nimium que gestis. Oti et reges prius et beatas perdidit urbes. I can't compete with the rock god, superhero, gods, begging him to accept the shiniest halo, that man, intent on you, oogling, provoking your sexy laughter. I'm muted. My nerves torn out with hooks. Because when I see you, Claudia, I fumble for a line and find a lacuna. Mouth crammed with earth, limbs hot and clumsy with longing, high tide pounding my skull, trashed headlights and a windscreen crazed to opacity. Idling Catullus. It stalls your intention, and maidens call it love in idleness. Without a plan, you're restless and distracted. Idle coasting toppled kings and golden cities in legends.
Oh, go ahead with giving head to the Godhead. God help us, he outdogs the gods of dogging, monopolizing you with his cheap tactics, paying attention, making you laugh, and my receptors go haywire because one look at you, mistress, and I can't even form a polite request for Semanawa. My tongue dries cold blue, tied to bamboo. Slung body hurts in tight jute knots. Rope burns and bare skin flinches from hot wax drips. Techno rattles my brain. Stinging eyes submit to the blindfold and wanking Orlando. It's unproductive. Wanking makes you fretful and distracted. Legendary kings and shiny cities lost to wanking.
Passe.
Sprung from shielding by a sigh on skin, pent up stormy skies at the equinox are calmed by breath of a traveller's west wind. You can leave the plains of duty, Catullus, and the stuffy trap of productivity. Book a one-way ticket to city glitter. Let your blanched ambition find the light. Map the spaces where you'll dance and run. Friends so close without touch in this ordeal. We've come too far from our intended roads. Let's part and meet our freedom in scattered ways.
Number 30, perfido. Alphenus, stirrer, traitor, heart macerator, false flag planter, ironclad stone heart bastard. Happy now you've let me down? No regret for my lost embrace? Treachery won't get you likes and followers. You left me washed up on my rocky island. Where should the loyal long-term investor look now? I'm mastered by your inkblot pupils spreading as you close in for your on-center perfect kiss, Cupid's bow cruelty. Then I'm blocked. Everything you did and said, howled down by winds, deleted from the cloud. Trade nebulas all you want. Lash to cryptocurrency, facts will find you out. Holding counterfeit.
Kylie, lesbia nostra, lesbia illa lesbia, quam Catullus unam plusquam satque solos amavit omnes. Nunc in quadrivis et angiputis glubit magnanimire mine putis. Ocylius, mistress, herself, her worship, our own lady of the labia, the one the poet loved more than himself and all the rest. Now downloadable, dogging in urban areas and choking on locally elected members.
Catherine Rowlands, and I'm reading Catullus 87. Nulla potest mulier tantum sedicera matam, vere quant ma me lesbia matam meast. Nulla fides ullo, fuit umquam ferre tanta, quant in amore tu ex parte reparte meast. No woman can attest that she is in receipt of love to the degree assigned to Lesbia by me. No contract holds as tightly as the force of love that binds me to your claws.
La quarta corda reads Catullus poem 36.
Anna les volusi, cacata carta, votum solvite promea puella. Nam sancte venericu pidinique vovit, si sibi restitutus essem desissemque truces vibrare iambos, electissima pessimi poete scripta, tardi pedide odaturam infelicibus ustulanda lignis. Et hoc pessima se puella vidit, io cos'è lepidevo vere divis. Nunc cerule o creata ponto, que sanctida liuri osco apertos, quequam conac nidunqua rundinosam colis, quequam atunta, queque golgos, queque durraci adrie tabernam, acceptum facere ditunque votum, si non ille pidumne quim venustest. At vos interea venite in ignem, pleni ruris et infacetiarum, Anna les volusi, cacata carta.
Now we turn to the Andrex Annals, scribbled by Mr. Voluble. There let mistress keep her promise to Venus and Cupid, no less. She swears on her pile of high-gloss Taschen books that if I come back to her bonds and don't spike her on spondies, she'll take the juiciest chunks from the worst poet and let the fire god Vulcan, how appropriate, he's lame, scorch them in her Stefano Ferrara pizza oven. The world's worst woman thinks it's some kind of joke about my selected works. Let Venus, emerging from the pool to drip blessings on Araki's collector's editions while noting a personal preference for Segura, stamp a receipt for a smart substitution.
Here's Mr. Voluble's epic crap. Into the flames, a shoddy shitfest. Kakata karta. Do you want to play Spot the Painting? Yeah? Yeah, you see? Botticelli, Birth of Venus.
Catullus 101. Multas per gentes et multa per aequora vectus advenio has miseras frata ad inferias ut te postremo donarem muneri mortis et mutam nequiquam allocare cinerem. Quando cudem fortuna mihi tete abstulit ipsum, Hu miser indigne frata, adempti mihi. Nunc tamen interia haec prisco quae more parentum tradida sunt tristi muneri ad inferias. Accipe, frata no multum manentia fletu, atqui in perpetuum frata, ave, atqui vale. And now Isabel's version. Flight shamed through the earthbound points and checkpoints, I am here, brother, for this bleak ceremony, to help you fathom death's assembly kit and offer useless words to wordless ashes. I wasn't strong enough to keep hold of you. Now I'll never find the missing piece. Here are the conventional sad tokens for the old rituals that told us so. Take them, sea splashed with a brother's tear, and forever, like the tide, my brother, I come to claim you and to let you go.
Passer, deliciae meae puellae, qui cum ludere, quinsinut tenere, qui primum negetum dar appetenti, et acres solet incitare morsus. Cum desidereo meoni tenti carum nescio quid libetio cari, et solaciolum sui dolores cred ut tum gravis acquiescet ado. Tecum ludere, sicut ipsa possem, et tristes animi levare curas.
Oh, little beak, how mistress loves to play with you and guard you in her nest. Feed your craving with her fingertip. Sharpen your need. Make you nip hard. She is the glowing core of my desire, but looks to you for flights of entertainment and a fluttery release. We trust. To let the tide of urgency subside, I pray to uncage you as mistress does, and to make the crushing tortures of the soul lighter than a feather's stroke.
This is where we leave Catullus for now, but the book ends with a tiny anthology of bondage references in literature, so we'll finish with 2 items from that. First, the mountaineer Stephen Venables reads from his book A Slender Thread, Escaping Disaster in the Himalaya. In 1992, Stephen and 3 companions made the first descent of the sacred mountain Panchchuli 5. The descent took all night. Just before dawn, the anchor securing the abseil ropes failed, sending Stephen plunging down the mountainside. Regaining consciousness at dawn, he was amazed to find himself alive, but he was badly injured.
Right, let's see. There was a sharp burning pain in my groin where my harness was digging in under tension. The ropes were tangled round my body. Above me, they stretched in a tight line towards dark rocks. I tried craning my neck to look up, but could distinguish no human shapes, just a slender thread attached miraculously to something on the mountain. There was still no sound, just a bleak grey emptiness. I seemed to be suspended in some gloomy limbo, alone and deserted. I wondered whether the others had been pulled off, whether they were all dead or unconscious from terrible injuries, powerless to rescue me from this overwhelming sense of abandonment.
Come, wait upon him, lead him to my bower. The moon, methinks, looks with a watery eye, and when she weeps, weeps every little flower, lamenting some enforced chastity. Tie up my lover's tongue. Bring him silently.
I can see from the comments in the chat box that you've all really enjoyed that. That was an incredible series of readings, apart from mine, of that really bring the music of the poetry to life. I've so enjoyed that. What struck me in that one was the reading of poem 46, Sprung from Shielding by a Sigh on Skin. We should mention the sign language interpretation of that, not actually a literal sign language reading of it, but an interpretation. But who would have thought Catullus was writing about lockdown? Friends so close without touch of this ordeal, we've come too far from our intended roads, let's part and meet our freedom in scattered ways. That's what we're all feeling at the moment, isn't it? Catullus, Isabel, you're bringing him very much into today and giving him a new voice for today.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's not exactly a literal meaning, obviously, but, you know, putting the schoolgirl to one side, you can then, the thing is, it's all there. When I seem to have gone wildly off, there's one poem in which I translate Soleil's sun as Japan. Well, you know, okay, the Empire of the Sun, it's all right. There's some little seed there, but the poem number 46 about
as I made it, the end of shielding, the end of lockdown, was an absolute gift. He was stuck in a boring job in a Roman province. He clearly didn't think much of his boss. I'm sure the feeling was mutual. And at last, he's writing about how the spring equinox has come, which of course it has for us as well. And he can go home while sampling the flesh pots on the way of Asia Minor. So, hey, happy, good for him, good for us, one day.
Now, I'd like to encourage everybody to put questions in the Q&A box, as well as your comments in the chat box, which are really positive. Thank you all for those. But Ranald Barnicott has asked whether you consulted other translations as you worked, or whether you were working completely from scratch.
I think once you're translating, it's about what I was saying earlier about having your body on the slab. You know, you want to get your poet sort of pinned out and anatomized so that you can see clearly into the entrails of your chosen poet. And you don't really want to have any sort of incoming, I think, clutter in your head, because it's ultimately not down to what other people think. It has to be down to what you think. I'm going to make one glowing exception: bedside reading, James Mitchie, who I thought was my dirty little secret, but quite a lot of people, this is very popular with a lot of people. It rhymes. Fantastic. I'm not trying to do that, except, well, just in a few of them I do get a little bit formal. I do have some rhymes and half rhymes and so on, and Catullus has half rhymes himself, a lot of assonance, a lot of music, repetition, alliteration, but this was basically safe for bedside reading, safe to go near, because he's trying to rhyme, and hats off, it's an extraordinary feat.
Paul McGrath has asked whether you've been translating Catullus all your life since you started learning Latin. Has it always been something there, or is it something that you've gone back to after the gap?
Yes, I think you meet him at school in a sort of fairly bowdlerized form, or certainly when I was at school he was bowdlerized. And when you're a sulky adolescent, you think, oh yeah, he's misunderstood just like me. He's got unrequited love problems just like me. And of course, it's not really quite like that at all. But his language has a clarity that you can approach at school, but also there's a fantastic command of everything he can do, all his different styles, all his different meters and so on. So the answer is, Paul, yes, on and off since school, skirting the issue. And some of the translations in the book may be about sort of 20 years old, just a few of them, but most of them, as I say, are post the sort of Shibari discovery, which is about, 10 years ago now.
And what led you to pick the ones that you've included in the book? What was the reasoning behind those choices?
Well, first of all, I did a set of poems which I thought were clearly the most bound, the most, you know, I cannot get out of this situation I am in, even though I might have chosen to put myself in this in the first place. And I stopped, excuse me, I did 17 poems. And I thought, hey, right, I finished. And then I realized that actually his whole predicament, and that's a word in bondage, you know, you can put people in a predicament that they can't move in any direction. And he, in a way, chose to be in that state. And of course, it was great for his art because he thrived on conflict. He chose conflict. He was a great hater as well as a great lover. He obviously wound people up. He was rich enough and independent enough to insult people like Julius Caesar and get away with it. So yeah, he could, excuse me, he had a life of bondage metaphorically, and of course that's very helpful with the vocabulary as well when you're trying to come up with a free and a new translation.
And the question that follows on from that is whether the inner schoolgirl ever held you back. Was there anything where you said, oh, I can't do that?
Yeah, but then you have to sort of punch the inner schoolgirl around the face and just sort of get on and do it anyway. It's useful to have that voice. You need some kind of voices of sanity when you're doing a free translation, because you think, well, how far can I go without looking ludicrous? Yes, you have to follow your own star, look into your own soul a bit, I suppose. But the schoolgirl, there's conflict everywhere you look here, and she was both a help and a hindrance.
And Adam follows on from that by asking whether, if you're not translating as a schoolgirl, are you translating in another character? Are you adopting another character to do one poem or another poem?
Well, Catullus himself adopts different characters, and he's a very dramatic writer. A lot of his poems are like dramatic monologues, which you could recite. And don't forget, he was probably reading his own poems aloud to a convivial group of like-minded people. And going for the dramatic effect. For example, there's one poem where he's writing hastily to a prostitute saying, right, can I see you this afternoon? I'm ready, I've got a massive erection, and you know, I'm going to be able to manage it 9 times in a row. And you think, God, the dissonance going on here. Does he not realize this is a professional woman? Time is money to her. On the other hand, if he is reading this out to his convivial gathering, he knows he is going to get a laugh on that 9 times line. And I do believe the more you get into it, and the more, of course, when you're translating, you have to read it aloud, the more I think he is writing his own gags, his own comic material, and he knows full well where the laughs are going to come. It's very dramatic stuff. He is adopting his different characterizations, or he is maybe overwhelmed by one particular mood, one particular frame of mind as he goes. He's like a chameleon. So you have to sort of switch yourself and treat each poem on the slab individually, and listen to what he is saying without, I hope, trying to superimpose myself on it, except when you get a gift like poem 46 about the end of lockdown, the end of shielding, yes, I will sort of haul it in and make it fit that theme, but not into Procrustean a way, I hope.
We've got a tricky question here, again from Ronald Barnicott. So he says, I was once informed by a poet at the Poetry Cafe that Catullus was a horrible man who stood for homophobia and a rape culture and should be called out. And of course, there is a very current question, is this calling people out for that kind of attitude? So are such considerations important? Are they justified?
He lived, excuse me, he lived, apologies, he lived in ancient Rome, which was a slave-owning society. We cannot imagine what it was like. There was no police force, there was no NHS, there were rich people amassing what were essentially private armies, trying to sort of slug it out for control of Rome, of the riches, invading other territories to boost their own sort of political ambitions. We really can't imagine what it was like. It was very other. And when I found Shibari, I found the fetish world, which although is very much diluted now and it's based on consent and acceptance and no means no, at the same time, there was a sense of some shackles being got rid of while other shackles were being assumed, which helped me just get a glimpse, no more than a glimpse, of what the ancient Roman culture might have felt like. And also it was different from what was happening in the street outside when I went to the bondage club in Camberwell. You were stepping, it's like Alice in Wonderland, you were stepping into another world, although, as I've said before, it was a club world, it was a special interest group, and the same kind of special interest vibe I definitely feel at Kensington Gardeners Club meetings, because it's the same focus on a particular private specialization. So we have to excuse Catullus for living in the times he lived in, which was ancient Rome. We can't do anything about that.
2 people have asked the same question, which is, who's next? Is there another poet that you would like to tackle?
I've done more than half of Catullus's poems in terms of number. I've done 60 out of, in fact, it's 113 rather than 116 because 3 of them aren't there anymore, as being not thought to be genuine. So there is more Catullus to be done. I'd kind of like to get out of COVIDiana first.
We all.
And see where we are then. But there are various things on my mind that I slightly don't want to jinx by talking about, but I have certainly enjoyed this free treatment, and I've got hundreds or possibly thousands, I don't know, of bondage drawings. A lot of them are just out of camera range there. So who knows, actually? I'm the last person to ask, actually. I haven't got a clue.
And we can also mention that your drawings are available on your blogs and on your website. So anybody who wants to see more of them can go out and look. And I do recommend that you look at that and the Supreme Court blog as well. And another question from Alice Blakeway. How did you cope with the long list of Venus's dwelling places? in 36, the Kakatakata poem. The way you did it worked very well, she says. Was it difficult?
No, I just dumped all Venus's dwelling places to make them bondage tropes. So instead of having all these things, the places don't mean so much to us now. Because Catullus is very learned, he's on top of all the myth. He knows where he is, his audience also know where he is. So he can mention Venus's different locales and people will say, oh yes, very sage, and they sound beautiful as well. I can't do that, so I'm making this one. Of course, I had a Harrods teddy bear. I decided to make this one back about the Martini glamour set and just have names and labels. So I'm talking about Taschen Books and Stefano Ferrara Pizza Oven, and I made that the equivalent. And I mentioned Araki and Segura. This is just a nod to people in the Shibari world because they will recognize those names as probably the two most prominent photographers of Shibari today. So it's a little bit luxe. It's a little bit high living in the 1970s. I don't know, it's my image.
We've got a comment in the chat box from Andrea Parolfi, who is La Quarta, I believe, and who read that poem for us. And he says he suggests everyone reads your poems, and I cannot tell you how much I enjoyed his reading of it. I thought that was fabulous. I'm going to adopt Kakatakata in my submissions to the court tomorrow. May it please your lordship, in response to my opponent's Kakatakata, as Catullus would say, I'm sure I'll get away with it.
That La Quarta Corda's reading of poem 36 is, I believe, the best spoken Latin I'm likely to see in my lifetime. And just to say about La Quarta Corda, he is in Florence, which is the best I could do to get you close to Catullus, because Catullus was brought up in Verona. So I really am trying to do my best to give you the full Catullus experience here tonight.
Another question in the chat box. Did Catullus love more than he hated or hate more than he loved?
It's impossible to tell because we know so little about him. The only facts, well, not even facts, what we know about him is from his poetry, which of course is terribly dangerous because it's the artist as hero. He is writing exquisitely constructed. He was absolutely the master of his art, very carefully created works. So he is creating himself in his own image. On the other hand, yeah, you can see he is lashing out. There is some lavatory wall type stuff. He was a real hater, and he was free to hate because he had a private income. So he didn't have to suck up to a patron or anybody much. And I say, because Julius Caesar was a friend of his dad, he could even afford to be astonishingly rude about Julius Caesar. And after apologizing, because he's well brought up, getting away with it.
Speaking of being rude about our leaders, someone suggested that Boris Johnson would have been a good choice to read one of your poems. Which one would you pick for Boris Johnson to read?
May I just go silent at this moment?
Indeed, I think...
Sorry, we don't want, you know, yeah, I need a bit of defense, yeah. So I just need some yeah, bit of TLC here.
The time has come, I think, for us all to go silent.
Okay, I apologise to the questioner for not answering that question. I know it's rather rude of me. I'm sorry. If you get in touch with me afterwards, please. I mean, anyone who wants to ask me anything afterwards, please do, or phone me or email or something. But particularly that questioner, I feel I've let you down. It was a good question, but I'm broken here. Okay.
And of course, I'd like to remind you all that the link for buying the book is at the head of the chat. So scroll back up, get clicking and get buying. And this is a wonderful book. As you've had a tasting of this this evening, but there's far more in it that you haven't heard yet. And with that, I'm going to thank Isabel very much for talking to us this evening. And I'll hand back to you, Jasmine.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Isabel, and congratulations. This has been really, really fun. Thank you, guys, for being here and for all of your lovely comments in the chat and for your great questions. Before we go, do check out our blog soon. We're going to be publishing some more of Isabel's drawings. We've also got a video where Isabel's going to be talking to you about how she makes the drawings. So look out for that. We'll be tweeting about it and stuff. And please do join us again next week. We're launching another book from our New Poetry's cohort. So we'll be with Victoria Kennefic launching Eat or We Both Starve. That's with John McAuliffe and Martina Evans. So check the website for details. And again, I'll just drop that link in the chat for you. So go and buy Isabel's new book, please do, or check your emails tomorrow for the link. Thank you all for being here. I'll leave the chat open for a couple of minutes so you can just get your last minute messages in. But that's all from me now. So thanks so much and congratulations again, Isabel, and good night.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you.